This is Football at 4.
Football at 4 powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. It's brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Adam Caplan's here from the Inside the Birds podcast, which you can get on all podcasting platforms or check out their YouTube channel. Just search Inside the Birds. It's been a wild, tumultuous week for the Eagles, but free agency is almost here. We're going to start to see how they put this team together. And by the way, on Tuesday, when Adam Caplan is back on for Football at 4, Howie Roseman and Nick Sirianni are both going to be speaking at the Combine, so we will get some updates from them. We got an update on the salary cap and how that could help some teams out, including Philadelphia. What does this mean for the NFL season? Some big names in Miami, by the way, have just been cut. Xavier Howard is one of them, and obviously a lot of ties to the Vic Fangio stuff. So let's bring in Adam Caplan for today's Football at 4. It's been an interesting week around the Eagles there. Mr. Caplan, how are you?
Mike, I'm well, yeah. So and we're going to get into salary. We don't talk much about the salary cap on your show because typically when we talk Eagles, they don't have a problem with it. And we'll explain what the salary cap means and the so-called salary cap casualties. But look, the bottom line is this was pretty big news today. This is not anticipated in terms of what the cap is, Mike. The cap went up over $30 million over last year. Now, if you remember, going back to the pandemic, it dropped, it regressed because the clubs were not getting the money in that they normally would get because there were no fans for the most part. TV money was down, everything was down. Now it's way, way, way up. And the cap, Mike, it jumped $30.6 million over last year when it was $22.4 million. So it's great. I mean, it's great. Every team gets this increase. Now, some teams, because of cap issues, they all start with the same number, and they go up or down based on how they balance their cap. So we don't know exactly where the Eagles are at the cap. From what we heard, they're in fair shape, not great shape, but that's okay. I'll explain why it's not a big deal in a minute. But they're teams like the Saints, who are historically the worst team in cap shape every year. They have to furiously restructure contracts. They're one of these teams that simply won't cut players. They don't believe in salary cap casualties like most teams don't. It's kind of a fallacy by the media. The media's usually wrong on this. They just continue to restructure contracts, restructure, and then once the guys are too old, they cut them, and then they take a big salary cap hit. So that's kind of what that means. But in the end, this is great news for every NFL team, and particularly a team like the Eagles, who they have more cap space than they anticipated. This means less restructures. They won't have to restructure. Not that they have many guys to restructure left, because they've done so many in recent years. There are not a lot of guys they can go to right now anyway.
Yeah, and the Eagles, I think, entered the offseason, right under $20 million of cap space. This is going to probably change the dynamics of what possibly them and a lot of teams. What does this mean for this season for NFL teams?
Yeah, and now what the other part of this, it means more extensions. Now, let me give you I try to explain this so everyone can understand. I typically have a better understanding on the cap than most people, but I try to dumb it down and make it easier, just like it was done for me, so I could understand when I first started covering the league. You don't need to have $30 million or $40 million on the cap to do a massive amount of structures. You could actually do, as Joe Banner told me, former Eagles president, you could have $5 million in cap space to do 3 extensions. Why is that? You don't do a signing bonus, a very small one. The first-year cap number is minimal. It's very small. Then it goes up. Now, the Eagles are king. They're the ones who do these bonuses. What option bonuses are inside contract signing bonuses in a way. So, for instance, let's say that the Eagles do a contract extension. That almost all of them have option bonuses, which mature or they become due in the second or third year. That gets prorated once it goes live. There's a date that it goes live, and it prorates over the life of the contract. So that's when they have to be, the hope is, if it's a fully guaranteed option bonus, that the guy's playing well, that they don't get zapped. Here's the problem. I'll give you an example of where it becomes a problem. James Bradbury has an option bonus due, okay? It's fully guaranteed. which means if the Eagles cut him, they owe it. If he's on the roster, they owe it. There's simply no way that this guy could be on the team based on the way he played last season, Mike. He has a fully guaranteed option bonus of $9.64 million. His base salary of $12.1 million is fully guaranteed. Just under $11 million, they owe him fully guaranteed. He should have got benched, but he sort of did. He got his role was regressed. It was cut down. He was so bad they couldn't cut him because he's a veteran. They had no one else they could start. But you saw the young kids start to play. So this is what happens when you give these option bonuses in the second year or third year, and the guy's in a regression. You're kind of stuck, and that unfortunately that's where we're at here with James Bradbury.
So you take a look at that, Adam Caplan, Football at 4 here. You got these so-called salary cap casualties, and if they exist, how much is that tied to where you are? Like, for instance, Miami today, I mean, they told Xavier Howard they're going to release him. Emmanuel Ogbah, they've released him. They're cutting guys who are actually guys who helped them out. Are those guys considered cap casualties?
All right, so I said to Jeff Mosher, I said Ogbah's going to be cut. I said this on today's show. We were talking about him and playing for Vic Fangio. I said, here's the problem. With his structure, he had a 4-year deal with a 2-year structure. There's just simply no way he was coming back a $17.8 million cap number, a $15 million non-guaranteed base salary. He's a backup. You're not paying him that. Now, what they could have done if they really wanted on the roster, would say, Emmanuel, here's what we'll do. We'll pay a $4 million. We'll get upside to $8 million with incentives. But they didn't do that. They didn't even give a chance to come back. As soon as he signed that 4-year deal, like he's done after 2, he's not that good of a football player. Mm-hmm. He's also, by the way, he turns 31 in November. Now, he's a guy who could be a third end. He also could stand up. He could play with his hand down. He has some value to be a backup, but he's a backup at this time in his career. These situations are most likely very simple to figure out. Now, one that's fascinating, they just announced the Ogbah deal. Now Xavier Howard has been told they're going to release him. Xavier Howard had a foot injury last season. He's got a base guarantee coming up. $4 million of his $15.4 million base salary becomes fully guaranteed on March 17th. So they clearly don't want to pay him that. His salary cap number is an unhealthy $26 million. Here we go. He turns 31. Again, he's older than I thought. You can't justify it. If they really wanted him there, Mike, he would be there. This comes from salary cap people. They do not believe in salary cap casualties. I'm just telling you, this is the way NFL people think. If you think the player is good enough, you're not going to cut him. If the player's not in regression, you're not cutting him. You cannot justify Xavier Howard's $26 million cap number and base salary of $15.4 million unless he's playing well. He's not. He was hurt last season. He regressed a little bit. Still could play. By the way, he could still be a starter. He's like a number 2 corner now. But you just can't justify it. So, again, cap casualties really don't exist. It's a media-driven phrase which has mostly been debunked by NFL people. I could tell you that because they've done this to me when I've mentioned it.
All right. Obviously, the Eagles have some interesting decisions coming up here. So do you foresee them having to cut anybody?
Yeah. Now, here's the thing. Other than Bradbury, Mike, as I go through contracts, as I always do this time of year, there's really no one. Well, Avonte Maddox, it's simple. We all know he cannot come back on a salary. That is obvious. Okay, that's simple to figure out. The question for the Eagles is this: it's not like he's super old. He turns 28 on March 31st. Okay, so he's 30. He's 28 in NFL years. He's not 31 or 32. When he plays well. But you can't justify him with his major injury history. You can't justify paying him $7 million, which is rounded off base salary, at his $9.7 million salary cap number. You can't do it because he's hurt too much. Now, what you can do is say, Avonte, we want to keep you. You're a high character guy. You've been a good story development. We'll bring you in here for $3 million. We'll give you upside of $5 million. Take it or leave it. If he says no, he's out. Simple as that. And as Joe Banner told me, former Eagles president, whenever you approach a player for a pay cut, you have to assume they're going to say no. You have to be prepared for them to say no. If you're not, you're not doing your job correctly. Now, what if they say cut him outright, which I think is realistic? We actually talk about that, by the way, on today's Inside the Birds show with Greg Cosell. We started the Intel with Greg Cosell. Surprisingly, we kind of moved it up to today. And wouldn't you know, we were talking about slot corners. and also the Eagles' nickel situation. With Maddox's injury history, Bradley Roby's up. They don't have a nickel on their roster right now if they cut Maddox. And despite the rumor out there, it's not true. Isaiah Rodgers has not been reinstated yet. He might be.
Yeah.
He has not been. Now, if Isaiah Rodgers is reinstated, which should happen, but it's not a lock, but if it does happen, they're targeting him to play in nickel. Now, he's played more outside than inside in his career, but as Cosell told us, Kenny Moore, their nickel corner, he only plays inside. Kenny Moore would play inside in nickel, and their plan was probably going to be to play Rodgers on the outside, had he not been suspended and then cut, of course. So Rodgers is a guy the Eagles like. He could run. He could be a returner. This guy's got a lot of talent, but he's got to get reinstated first. So again, Mike, they don't have that nickel corner right now. That is definite. So we're going to track the Maddox situation. So to answer your question, move this forward. Who are guys that we have to take a look at in terms of being approached to take a pay cut? Maddox would be one of them. The only question with Bradbury is could they even justify even coming him back? Mike, they owe him just under $11 million, whether he's on the team or not. It's can they find someone who could be a trade partner? I'd be shocked.
Right.
And can they figure out a way to bring him back and figure out a role for him, even as a backup? It's going to be hard. It's hard to justify it. And Mike, they're so bad in the secondary. They got to kind of rebuild it. Let's call it like it is. They don't have a starting safety right now. Reed Blankenship and Cosell talked about it today with us. You'd really like them to be your three. We had a source tell us it'd be better off as an Eagles force safety. Smart guy, not a good athlete, good tackler, but he's a step slow. Byard, Greg tells us today, he gave us a little bit of an intel on what his tape looked like. I suggest people listen. By the way, it's on YouTube and every platform on podcasts, so you can get that anytime, 24 hours a day. But the Eagles really, Mike, have to rebuild the back end of their defense. It's a bottom five back end of the defense right now. Call it like it is.
Yeah, so I want to get your opinion real fast on guys who are tied to Fangio. Do you view them as legitimate fits and targets? You know, the Van Ginkels, Josie Jewell, I think, played for him in Denver. Yep. There's a couple others.
Sure. Yeah, Howie Roseman, their GM, one of his strengths, and I've talked to their coaches about this over years, is he's really good at, let's say a coach comes in, right, or they have the personnel meeting, hey, Howie might say, who do you like out there? He doesn't guarantee anything, but Howie will put on his list to take a look at with his pro personnel staff, meets with the coaches during their free agency meetings, and they kind of go, okay, we agree with you or we don't agree with you. Where are the guys? Van Ginkel is up. That would be one. Deshaun Elliott's had a lot of injuries in his career. He's a young journeyman. That's just a stopgap. He's a 27-year-old safety. Not bad, but that's not what you're looking for. Brandon Jones was really good before his ACL injuries. He's more of a physical safety. But yeah, I would say Josie Jewell's a guy. Now he's had some injuries in his career. He wouldn't cost you very much. We just mentioned Agba, who the Dolphins just released. But he is depth at 31 years old. You got to be careful. This is what we talked about on the show with Cosell today. You got to be careful trying to patchwork your football team. That's not how you win. You win with good young players. The Eagles have to get much younger and faster and explosive on defense. They do not have a lot of explosiveness on defense on the back seven. Let's call it like it is.
Yeah, they are definitely. You talked about bottom five, but some of that too is you got Bradbury, who just completely went from it. He was an All-Pro, right? His first year here, he was a second-team All-Pro. Bradbury.
Yeah, and Mike, the funny thing was, and you know this because we talked about this many times on your show. We had teams telling us they were dying to go after him, but they couldn't because they couldn't protect. And now that's the thing, is if you could protect, by the way, you could go after him, and teams did last year. The Eagles' pass rush wasn't as good, and that was that.
All right, a lot going on with this team, obviously, and the Combine getting underway next week, and Howie and Nick Sirianni will talk on Tuesday, so I'm sure we will get a lot out here. I would imagine the first question will be, do you need Big Dom to settle you down here at the Combine this week, right? Can you believe that?
You know what? I know, and I heard you with Missinelli before I came on. I thought of our friend Derek Gunn, who hosted Gunn 101 with us on our platform last season. That was a part of his two-part report, which I found fascinating. And look, it's not a secret what Dom does for them, but Is he their get-back coach? No, but to help keep his emotions in check, I mean, that has value. That's a little bit of an extra value. Not most security directors don't do that, Mike. Let's face it. Now, does he need him to do that? Maybe so. I thought that was kind of interesting. I did. By the way, so on Tuesday I'll be there. Andrew DeCecco and I will be there. Howie talks at 1:30.
Yep.
Nick talks at 1:45. I do your show at 4 o'clock. We'll talk about it. You know, on Inside the Birds, we're not a big rehash of press conference stuff unless there's something interesting that we think people need to know. But because it's the only time they'll be talking they only talk twice. They talk together twice. They talk now this week and then at the owners' meetings separately. Howie does sort of an off-the-record one usually. Now, by the way, Jeffrey will talk at the owners' meetings. He always does, state of the team. And Nick has to talk there on the coaches' roundtable, which I enjoy doing. I enjoy going to. So look forward to that.
All right, we are too. There should be a lot of stuff happening next week with the Eagles, and we got it for you here on Football at 4. And don't forget to check out the latest Inside the Birds podcast on all podcasting platforms or on their YouTube channel. Just search Inside the Birds. Adam, have a good weekend, man.
You too. Thanks.